Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. William Scott White, yes, an official scientist of the Midnight Society, has already found his way past my werewolf guards and into the darkness of the fox den to awaken me from my slumber. Absolutely delicious. I do appreciate the gifts. I have been so hungry and thirsty. Now, without further ado, it is time for William and myself to take a walk into the madness.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf. And everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, yes, welcome back to an LordeStarfox radio. We have William White, a good friend of mine, and also one of the scientists that we do work hand in hand here with, is joining us again. He's already snuck by the guards to set up the late night fire for us as we burn the timber into the early hours of the morning. You are officially tuned in to the stomping ground of the Midnight Society. William, my friend, how you been, brother?
No, life's going pretty good. Can't complain at all. So, yeah, business is doing well. My family's well, and, like I said, got to be grateful for those things.
Yes, this is good. Excellent. Sounds like you are plugging away on things you need to and getting ready to gear up for some good old quality weather and some adventures. Kudos
Hopefully.
to you there.
It's been a muddy mess the last week, but it's better than snow and ice.
It was just snowing up here earlier, man. Actually, it didn't accumulate to too much, but yeah, it's pretty clammy still. But hey, we're up in the Northeast, as I stated before. It goes hand in hand,
That's right. That's what's expected.
Yeah, you get like 2 or 3 months of what a lot of other people would consider summer. And then the rest is, well, pretty much the other seasons. It's funny, though. Some of my friends in Tennessee claim you get all the seasons in one day sometimes. It definitely doesn't happen like that up here, though.
Yep. It's pretty cool, all the different areas we have in our country.
Right? Yes. Have you been diving into anything interesting lately with, per se, the Dogman or missing people or anything in general, or you just been focusing on what you had just spoke about?
Yeah, to be honest, I've just been focusing on life. I haven't followed any of the cryptid stuff, in the last few weeks. So I don't have fresh material per se, but I'm here to discuss, what you want to talk about. That's for sure.
Sweet. I appreciate it. It's always great to get some of your time to sit down. And to the audience, Mr. White is going to help us try to understand tonight why we are still lacking that money shot, per se, which we're going to dive into in just a second. Yeah, earlier, though, I did send William an image that is pretty typical to that description now of what people will say with the chupacabra, and you and I already spoke on a previous episode of why it varied from reptilian to this now. Yet that is definitely a coyote with mange.
Oh yeah,
And that's
or
my
a dog. Yeah, there's
yes.
nothing supernatural about it.
Once that starts making rounds, and some people such as yourself have the education to make voice on that, hopefully we can close that case file. So I was pretty intrigued and pumped about that. What are your thoughts on this? They have successfully or begun to bring back direwolves, and I've seen this
saw
now
that
from numerous outlets, okay? Not sketchy ones like Time Magazine and stuff, some really quality ones. Is this real life, bro?
Yeah, I mean, they've been talking about doing this kind of thing for a couple decades at least, basically ever since they cloned Dolly the sheep back in the 90s. Things like dire wolves and woolly mammoths and some of those ice age creatures, we have really good samples of them because they got frozen in the tundra, and in the ice sheets up north, and really, never decayed. They just kind of got dried out as, if you leave something in your freezer for several years, chunk of meat or something, it's going to be jerky, after a while. But they're in great condition, and that means that there are actual cells that they can extract from, potentially from the blood vessels, but usually it's from bone marrow. It's more protected inside the bone, and yeah, I mean it's a lot more real, I think, than the idea of Jurassic Park. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I'm looking forward to the day that there's like woolly mammoths in the zoo, or maybe even if they get all nature loving and try to restore everything, release a pack of them up north in Canada or something. That would be sweet.
So interesting right there. And that leads me into my next question for you before I actually have something pretty nightmare fuel to introduce to you. Do you think this is actually a good idea per se? Meaning, didn't nature replace these predators and herbivores in the food chain? Meaning, isn't like gray wolves now and coyotes and such more or less supposed to be the dire wolves? Isn't that dire wolf, if we do reintroduce them, how are other species going to be able to just recently or quickly adapt? Meaning, I don't know, isn't that going to cause chaos now in an environmental system that pretty much got rid of them because nature wanted to? I mean, if nature wanted the dire wolf around still, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And, I think you're right. I think the dire wolf probably would have a hard time competing in the modern environment, but mostly because it doesn't have its natural food source around. It hunted the megafauna, the ground sloths, the woolly mammoths, or at least it ate their carcasses. It may have been a scavenger. And the theory is that the gray wolf, which lived side by side with the dire wolf, replaced it because the gray wolf hunted smaller prey like deer and elk and stuff that exists today. So yeah, it may not be feasible for them to be released into the wild because they may just fail again, but you're absolutely right. They might push other creatures out of their, ecological niche that they've, been sitting in for the last 10,000 years. So that's a, bioethical quandary, I'm sure that people will have to answer and face. Obviously, if they were just kept in like zoos and private collections and stuff like that, it wouldn't be an issue. But I do think it would be cool to see them in the wild and see how they behave, in hundreds of acres of, great northern forest. Yeah, there's a lot of questions there. Should we, just because we can, should we? That speaking of Jurassic Park, that was what Dr. Malcolm, that was his name, right? That was what he said. Your scientists were so preoccupied about whether or not they could, they didn't think about whether or not they should.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean the little boy in me that wants to see dinosaurs, wants to see animals that have been extinct forever, would love it. But I recognize that there are definitely potential issues for sure.
Very great stuff from a brilliant mind, which I shouldn't expect anything less. Again, I'm with you. Obviously, it's super cool. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate, but also realist, meaning, yes, hasn't nature kind of done its thing since these things disappeared? Meaning,
Yeah.
yeah, like the sturgeon's still kicking around, so are crocodiles and alligators. Nature wanted them around still, and they are
Now,
kicking around.
on the other hand, one of the theories about why the megafauna off is that humans hunted them to extinction. So maybe it's our fault. Maybe this is karma. Making up for our ancestors' bad deeds. But it wasn't bad. The reason why ancient man may have hunted mammoths and other things to extinction was because we were hungry. We needed to survive. So that's one of those things that I'm sure will be hotly debated if this goes forward. And now the other theory about how the megafauna off was some of the massive, well, that doesn't line up with the timetable, because the last eruption of Yellowstone was like 640,000 years ago. They do think that did off a lot of animals, but it didn't. We know that woolly mammoths, there were like pygmy mammoths alive in remote areas of South America and islands up until, like, some people think even around the time that the Spanish explorers discovered America, but definitely within the last 2,000 years. So they obviously survived that event. But yeah, Yellowstone, when it erupted, the last time it threw tons and tons of volcanic ash up into the air. And this is a real issue for us today, because it's been 640,000 years since Yellowstone erupted, and it tends to erupt every 620, I think.
Wow.
And that ash spread all across the northern hemisphere. And the one of the theories is that it the animals, most of the animals that lived in those areas, just because they were inhaling it, they were eating it in their food. And we're not talking like campfire ash. We're talking basically like fiberglass, tiny little sharp little crystals of silica that would shred your lungs over time, damage your digestive system. And these animals just ended up from that, not immediately, but probably within a few days, weeks, months at the most. But yeah, that did not cause the direct extinction of the mammoths or any of that stuff, but it did off a ton of the megafauna that was around, like I said, over 500,000 years ago.
Boom, acute observations there as well. And recently, in a very remote part of Siberia on an island, there are scientists that are claiming they have mammoth DNA or mammoth proof from around 345 years ago that they were still in this supposed remote region. Interesting right there. Also, a lot of people don't realize there is a difference between a mastodon and a woolly mammoth, which I didn't really fully understand until I was watching some more in general, because I love to learn. The mastodon is pretty much like the evil twin or sister. I feel like they were brutal.
It's ugly.
The adaptation, though, I guess we don't know the final outcome. Unfortunately, some really not intellectual people decided to let pythons and Nile crocodiles loose in the Everglades.
Yeah.
So you have a huge battle now where seemingly most of the prey has been devoured, which obviously, now you have the pythons and crocodiles and alligators going amongst themselves and battling, per se, this out. We don't know the final outcome, but it seems like those crocodiles adapted quick enough, which obviously,
it's the right climate.
Yes, so it's not like a huge difference per se with like what we maybe trying to introduce like the dire wolves to or something, because very similar climate. They don't necessarily, some areas the crocs are dealing with like anacondas and such, but it just is very interesting to watch this little Royal Rumble go on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Florida is wild because it does have that subtropical climate that so many things can live in. There's even breeding populations of primates down there that have escaped from people's collections or from zoos or labs or whatever. And I mean, there's iguanas, which are not native to North America. Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of critters now in Florida. Add Nile crocodiles to the list. There are American crocodiles as well. Nile crocodiles just get a lot bigger, and American crocodiles are way more aggressive than alligators, but Nile crocodiles are, everything's food to them, especially when they get big.
Yeah, definitely. Nile are not, I guess in theory they say, as large as the saltwater. The salties are supposedly the craziest, but Niles are arguably just right up there with that attitude, which is insane. And I watched a video, which I again didn't really understand the differences. There was an alligator and crocodile out on pretty much the pavement crossing, and they were battling each other. Alligators don't really lift themselves up, they drag themselves, whereas the crocodile literally was up on all fours and walking. Yeah. It was a cool simulation to see in real time some of the differences, because I mean, you obviously see the similarities and the scales and stuff, then the behaviors. Wow, that crocodile had so much more agility. I could see why a crocodile is a better version of the alligator.
Yeah, absolutely. So, on that topic, yeah, when we introduce animals into ecosystems that they haven't been in for a very long time, it can cause all sorts of imbalances. That's what happened in Australia when foxes and cats got loose. They killed a lot of the Australian ground mammals and birds that never had. Yeah, didn't have to deal with those predators forever, literally hundreds of millions of years, and just were not able to adapt to them quick enough. In North America, once again, our cats and our dogs, they're not, well, dogs, the Native Americans did have dogs, but, definitely cats were not native to North America, not the house cat. And there's tons of wild cats and they off birds and probably are responsible for bird species extinctions and stuff. So, yeah, if we want to be good stewards of the planet, we need to be very, very careful about, what we do and what we introduce into areas, for sure.
Excellent observations. Again, a lot of people don't realize the house cat is the most brutal hunter of any animal.
They'll hunt for fun.
Yeah, straight up for fun. Meaning, there was a stray cat one time that used to come around. I'd feed her so good, but then a dragonfly would come by, even though she has some like chicken and gravy, just swats down the dragonfly, consumes it, and goes back. I'm like, no, kitty, you have a whole bowl of chicken and gravy you just loved. Why did you do that? Because I wanted to.
Yeah, my cat is fat and well fed, and but if a mouse gets in the house, eventually I'll find it because she'll have, it's just fun for them.
It is. That's sad, but the way it is, for sure. Also, recently, you're gonna like this. I don't know how much they can do with it, but they found soft tissue with blood cells in it still. I believe it was the femur of a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
I heard about that.
Portion of that. Yes. So now we're not looking at the embryo aspect, which is a little bit, far-fetched, like you said, pulling it out of amber or out of a mosquito. But here they have the blood in it. As far as I know, scientists seem to think chickens are pretty closely related to the Rex.
Or a bigger bird like an ostrich, Yeah.
Yes. So is it that far-fetched to think that they potentially could do something with that DNA, or they need more samples?
The question would be, how degraded is it? Because all things break down with time. And so I'm no expert on DNA or anything like that, but a T-Rex is going to be hundreds of millions of years old, like 200 million years old or something, and so they would be amazing, frankly a miracle if the DNA were intact enough for them to do something with. But if it was,
gotcha,
they might be able to splice it into, like I said, an ostrich egg, and that would be pretty crazy.
Wow, very interesting. I didn't even think of that. Like you said, even though it's, quote unquote kind of spongy, it still depends. It still could not be usable. It's just very cool, actually, that they had found that. Great observation again. Now, here to the audience, we're going to try to bring a little bit of clarity to the issue of quality evidence that seems to, unfortunately, be lacking per se in the whole Dogman phenomenon. Meaning, when you look at Sasquatch, whether people want to say the Patterson and Gimlin film is real or not, we're going to give you other examples after this real quick. Sure, but that's held up to time. Still, to this day, no one can debunk it. I mean, you have people that claim, but when it comes to push and shove, there's just as much to support it's real as there is to potentially debunk it. So, boom, it stands up. That's a dang good piece of footage, too. Then we have the Freeman footage, right, where he is holding one of these old school cameras that you pretty much had to have like on your shoulder, like April from the Ninja Turtles or something like that. You know what I mean? Being like the newscaster walking around. So he couldn't alter this tape whatsoever. This was back in like, I think 2004, give or take. He was I believe a park ranger. I may be incorrect. He was definitely associated with the forestry industry and was working for the park in some sorts. He had happened to go up there with his friends all the time. They found footprints occasionally. That's what I like about Freeman. He didn't find this stuff all the time, man. This was something that they spent a lot of time, him and his friends, looking for this, and they only occasionally found tracks and things. So it's not like every time they went out, they had these interactions. This point in time, he had happened to go back to the area and found some tracks. As he's recording the tracks, this is when that interaction happens. Again, now you have Meldrum and all these other brilliant people supporting that this is real. And on this one now, there's a lot less to support that there's anything being hoaxed or faked in it. You know, even the proof is out there on History Channel. Some other people with some clout, again, seem to buy into this.
Yeah, I mean, there's some real, Bear Grylls. There's some real credible people that, you know, are well known, have, you know, real professional reputations, and they'll tell you that they believe they've encountered Sasquatch. I mean, there's a lot there, you know, there. And yeah, there's a lot of good video and photographic evidence that's come down over the years. The only issue, I think the average person, a lot of people are willing to believe there's a Sasquatch out there. The only issue I ever hear from people is, well, where's the bodies? Why haven't we found a body? You know, I'm not saying I don't believe it. I do think there's something out there. But it's a pretty valid question. Like, well, how come we're not finding, like, you know, bones occasionally or remains of some sort, you know? And that's a question I don't have a great answer to. But yeah, you know, there comparatively, the Dogman is lacking in good concrete evidence. You know,
so badly, and excellent observations again. Not even just those two. I'm going to nail a couple more on before we dive into the Dogman side. You have the one that Monster Quest looked at as well, where this person would basically have to be insane, they said, to walk through the gator and poisonous snakes and spiders in the swamp to act like the skunk ape, where he was walking through the bog, basically. That's a really interesting Sasquatch one as well. And odd standing before he bought into all the hoaxing and wanted to become the goat pretty much and just started faking things. He has a really great one where no person in his suit could jump side to side up this terrain where it's like rocks on both sides and some trees going up a hill. And this creature does it. Boom, boom, boom. That's what I mean. We have this. We have vocalizations with Sasquatch. We have great footprints. We have body prints. All kinds of bam, in your face stuff. But now when we twist over to the Dogman, we do have these footprints, which, yes, that's why we have them up on our website. We do have these unknown vocalizations. Again, no one's really been able to figure these out, which is why we have these, right? But then every time there's been any video, it's always fake, someone in a costume or AI, right? Except for the one that seems to stand up, the Ohio Dogman digging in the graveyard that was presented to Jody. That's a cool video, but look how, again, it's not really high quality by any means. Okay, besides that, nothing, right? With the images, man, like I said to you, every image I send to you, other members of my science team, other people I value their opinion, even if they're not with us or the North American Dogman Project, they all say the same thing that y'all say. Hey, that's a bear, or just pareidoia, or nothing. Where is this image, you know, that we're missing here, do you think? Why is it? They can't be that much smarter than Sasquatch. I would highly doubt that, in my personal opinion. What's happening, you think?
I don't know. I mean, the one film, and they say it's been disproved because, you know, a guy came forward and said he faked it.
Gable, right?
Gable. I'm not sure I buy that one. I like the Gable film a lot.
So does Jody. You want to explain to me here?
Well, so, you know, I did 2 years of podiatry school. You know, it's basically medical school focused on the foot and ankle and lower leg. And watching that thing move through the woods, um, before it gets up to the truck, it moves in a way that I don't believe a human can move. So a man in a suit, it's too agile. It's too fluid. A man in a suit is not going to move like that. Now, it could be some disinformation thrown out. People say, "Oh, well, the in part where you basically see the thing's jaws right in front of the camera and its eye." That's just too Hollywood, and they may be right. But who's to say that wasn't kind of edited in there to discredit it? I really do like the Gable film. It to me it rang true, but I can't confirm that, and I know a lot of people feel it's been discredited. Other than that, yeah, I don't have a great answer for why people aren't getting good, clear images of this thing or video of this thing. There will be content creators out there who say, "Oh yeah, people have sent me such great video and footage, but they've asked me not to share it or whatever." It's like, yeah, bullcrap. I don't believe you.
And what's the use of that anyhow? Correct.
Right. So, I don't think it's that. I've hinted at it before here on the show. I do hold a strong theory that the Dogman may be more of a spiritual, paranormal sort of thing rather than a natural thing, and that could explain why people don't get good video of it, good pictures of it. And it also seems, there's Bigfoot sightings every month, maybe every week. I know people who've claimed to have seen Bigfoot, and I believe them. The Dogman seems to come in cycles. It seems like, you'll have 1 year where there's a ton of sightings, a ton of stories, and then you'll go 2 or 3 years without a whole lot. And to me, that speaks more to some sort of a supernatural thing, like a paranormal thing, not necessarily a truly organic creature. Because, who knows? Maybe it has to do with solar radiation, frequencies, or the Earth's magnetic field, or planetary alignments, or who knows what. But something that has to be just right for these things to come into our reality. That's something I toy with a lot in my pondering about the phenomenon. I do think that there is a Dogman, and that people are seeing these things, and that it's not just a bunch of people who want attention or who don't interpret correctly what they're experiencing. But it is a very, very important thing to consider why we're not getting anything like what we get with Bigfoot, Sasquatch.
Beautiful answers. That's really how I feel as well. I want it to be real. I do find it very interesting. As a journalist, this is why I'm here, trying to figure out what's occurring. Yet again, like I've always stated, as a journalist, you need to be subjective, objective, and also play the devil's advocate and look at different instances, meaning closest comparison we have would be Sasquatch, right? Meaning with, evidence-wise, so that's what I got to kind of compare it to. With all the other ones like Nessie and Mothman, they don't have the evidence like that. No, Dogman, if you want to compare it to something, there'd be Sasquatch. All right, but Sasquatch still is much, in my opinion, more built up, which is, yes, you made another great analysis too, and I've tried this. Lee Hampel from Wisconsin, he's actually right on Bray Road. He's one of my bi-weekly hosts. He has a ton of footprints that are super bizarre. So they go through his field, all right? And think how you and I walk. If you and I try to do basically what the OUI kind of test where you put your toe to toe, right, to walk in the snow like this, you could walk like that, but it doesn't feel good on your hips. Your hips aren't meant to do that. You're supposed to have a little bit of a gap in there as you're walking. You can see, okay, feet, left foot steps, your right foot. There might be a little bit of a distance, but it's not literally boom, boom, boom. So these tracks are going like that, like as if this thing is doing the DUI test, and all of a sudden now it splits off into two separate tracks where they go completely in the different direction. Like Lee was saying, was there two of them? Was it following perfectly in the tracks of the other one and then they split off? Or did this other one come and then meet up with it here? Or literally, did it just kind of manifest like that? What the heck?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you look at dog tracks, they're much more like that. They're much more, in line with each other. There might be a slight offset between the right paws and the left paws, but they don't. If imagine a medium-sized dog that's maybe 10 inches wide at the shoulders, its tracks aren't going to be 10 inches wide. They might be an inch wide apart from each other. So yeah, humans walk with a much different gait because probably because we're meant to be bipedal, and we're a different, totally different species, totally different family of animal. So that actually speaks to some credibility if they're not like a human gait. You remember Star Wars, A New Hope, where Obi-Wan tells Luke that it wasn't sand people that destroyed the sandcrawler thing, and Luke's like, well, why? He said, sand people, they come in a single file so that they can hide their numbers, and these tracks are,
Wow.
side by side or whatever. So yeah, I mean, if there were two of them, maybe they're smart enough to just march right down in a straight line so that it's hard to tell how many there are, and
Wow.
yeah, I don't know.
That just gave me the creeps thinking about that, meaning, hey, that's probably a tactic modern day people would be using, or per se, like, ninjas or something, or somebody that wants to conceal their numbers. That's brilliant, meaning, wow.
Yeah, it's just a thought popped in my head when you said that, but yeah, that's pretty cool. And there are tracks. People do find tracks of them. They find claw marks, 10 feet up in a tree or whatever, where it doesn't make sense for them to be, and much, bigger claw marks and wider apart than any North American creature would have. But yeah, there's just a real lack of video or photographic evidence, and these days it gets even worse because AI has gotten so good at making pictures look believable, that that's going to be something we're going to have to learn how to filter out.
Yes, that is some brutal stuff right there for sure, with the AI and just the fake images that people try to push over. Real quick, too, when you were talking about the Gable film, I was still trying to process this all in my head. When the gentleman himself puts on the ghillie suit, I think I remember seeing on Monster Quest, he tries to replicate the run. Okay. I'm understanding is, gathering from what you said and Jody said, and I've heard from some other people, it's basically trying to be covered up, you're saying? So you think somebody got that small segment in real life on there, and then you think this other guy, because this is what Jody and some others think too, is claiming he did that to discredit this and put it all together to mess. Okay.
I don't know for sure that, but I suspect that,
That is very interesting now. Wow. I always did find that to be bizarre, but as a scientist, and I guess maybe putting too much trust sometimes as a scientific mind, putting too much trust into other scientists speaking about it. I mean, I watched the Monster Quest and such, and I do enjoy Doug Hijack. He is a friend of mine. I do love Monster Quest, yet it still is something that is meant for entertainment to an extent, right? Yeah, they brought on those people that are scientists and things talking about the Gable film and such, but then you still kind of had what seemed like a resolution, but then not really, because that guy, I guess, just claimed he made it, and that seemed to be that. Because
that's all they needed to discredit it. That was it. They didn't go any further. They just said, yeah, that was me in a ghillie suit, and then he jumps around in the ghillie suit, and it didn't look right. Didn't that shape moving through the woods, it moves in a way that to me speaks to something that was meant to move on four legs.
So creepy. I would have loved to hear what Linda thought about that, and also some of the other great minds that might not still be kicking around with us, rest in peace, or even ones I just can't get a hold of, because I know your opinion now, and I know Jody's, and I've heard some others, yet I haven't seen too many people really give that a second look or enunciate their opinions about that. I think Steve Cook made a subtle kind of conclusion as well, meaning once that guy told him he made it, Steve Cook, I guess, was convinced the guy made it, or that was the narrative that Monster Quest, I guess, presented to us. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other things hitting on the Gable film that always stood out to me, if you watch it, you can see that things hind end kind of slew around as it's advancing. Like it's not in perfect alignment with its front end. And I've watched my dogs run, like, when they're loping along, especially on like a slope or tough terrain, and sometimes they do the same thing, where their back end is, at an angle to their front shoulders as they run along. And that's just something I don't, I don't know that a human who normally walks bipedally and is also encumbered by a ghillie suit is going to, think to do. Might be possible to do, but I don't know that that's just going to come natural.
Again, acute observations. Was that potentially, do you think, could have been a bear, or is that way too weird of emotion for a bear?
Yeah, it didn't. I watched that. It's been a few years since I've watched it, but I watched it many times when I discovered it.
I was watching it the other night.
It never stood out to me as a bear. Its front shoulders were pretty wide, and if you ever look at a black bear, which is what you'd find in Michigan, their front shoulders actually aren't all that wide. They're kind of sloped, and their midsection and hind section gets wider. That thing looked almost more like a gorilla, but not quite right. Not quite right for a gorilla. And the way people describe these dogmen is they're very broad in the shoulders, have a very powerful upper body. Wow. So on all fours, they might, have that look.
Whew. That now gets me again thinking, because as we're talking here, and as I do more and more research, and I hear the things like Lee Hampel and my friend Sophia from Bray Road tell me, and also how people see that these tracks just vanish. Well, maybe, and what we just spoke about, it is something supernatural, paranormal, or out of this realm, meaning that's why it just vanishes when there's no trees around, because maybe it was not ever fully here in the first place. I do not know enough about
it. Or it could only be here for a short amount of time, and then it has to, it's like it pops back into wherever it comes from. I don't know how these things work necessarily, but I'm the way people feel when they're around these things, the way they act. To me, it's almost, not saying they're a ghost. I don't think they're a ghost, but it reminds me of how, people who have encounter with, like poltergeists and aggressive ghosts, that sort of thing. It's like I said, it's more of a existential, a paranormal. I guess a lot of people would call Bigfoot and these things paranormal, but I view them as more supernatural. But this, paranormal to me has to do with like spirits and demons and the other world and stuff like that. And so I'm not saying that they are, but it is definitely an idea that I think has merit.
Excellent. I'm definitely starting to feel that I would per se Sasquatch and Bigfoot is more here. Yet now with the Dogman, I'm starting to kind of think a little bit more like we just said, only can be here for a few. It's really bizarre. And also now though with the Gable film, as you broke it down and started, making a little bit more sense about that, to me, that seemed to be pretty here. Meaning that if, we're going to, give a little bit of clarity to that or credence, that thing looked dang here. That didn't look trying to manifest or anything. That looked here.
I'm not doubting that when they're here, they're here. If what I'm saying is true, they may not always be here. They may.
So interesting.
Who knows if it's even their choice or not, or if it's, like I said, the stars align just right and, portals open up and they can stumble through, just like some people think that the missing 411 people disappear because they stumble through a portal.
Deep stuff right there. The
Yep.
straight up creeps. Well, as we are starting to tie this up, I have a little bit more of an interesting thing for you too. Not that that wasn't all completely interesting. As I listen to the Skinwalkers and about their lore, glowing eyes is one of the things that definitely
Hmm.
goes into hand. Like bright glowing eyes. And we've talked before about, the special layer of the membrane that does cause animals' eyes to glow. But, this seemingly is a much different,
Right.
apparent supernatural glow. But also, they seemingly over and over again, the indigenous cultures, he or she on all fours. Okay, not talking about you being a raging werewolf, more or less just being like the American werewolf in London when it is in that wolf form. That is just like a large wolf. It's not an upright dog soldier bipedal crazy werewolf. It's just a large wolf. So if
Hmm.
we stay to the Native American lore, which we should respect what they are actually putting out there and not put twists on that, that is what they depict that's going on. Here's
Hmm.
something that validates that, but also, like I just said, with the glowing eyes, makes me wonder a little bit. You had this gentleman, this is back in like the 1920s, so his grandfather had told him that he was out hunting. He happened to see this old, mangy looking coyote sitting up on the ledge.
Right.
He pulled up his rifle, he shoots it, it drops. Yet when he goes over, it's no longer an old mangy coyote. It's a young Navajo man with long hair with all these tattoos on him, but his lower half is still coyote with the
Hmm.
bent back legs and the tail. This man is so terrified, this indigenous man, that he threw it over the edge of the cliff and
Yep.
never spoke about it till later on in life. Again, though, according to him, this wasn't bipedal. It wasn't standing up, but it was also sitting down. Who knows if it would have been bipedal? He went
Yep.
over, but it looked like an old mangy coyote, but then he was young. Interesting. I mean, what do you
Yep.
think about that as we're tying this up?
Well, that jives. I mean, like I said, I lived in Arizona. I was born in Arizona. I have a lot of family from Arizona, um, and I know people who have lived on and near the reservation, and the everyone who does live near or on the reservation believes in skinwalkers, even if they don't believe in God, even if they don't believe in other spiritual things like ghosts and whatever. They all believe in skinwalkers, white or native.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, that's the type of thing that they'll tell you not to look at when you see, if you're driving down the highway, don't look at a weird dog or a weird coyote you see on the side of the road. Just ignore it, pretend like you didn't see it. Yeah, they're not talking about like look, werewolves. They're talking about coyotes or other types of animals that just there's something off about them. They're messed up. They're mangy. They don't move right. Their limbs are not the right length or something like that. And so yeah, that jives pretty well with stuff I've heard from people who've lived in those areas firsthand. So yeah, I don't know. That I think I talked about it when we discussed skinwalkers. There's a concept of a spell called a glamour, and a glamour spell changes how others see you. It
Yes.
doesn't necessarily change your nature, but it somehow you can affect the psyche and the perception of someone around you. Maybe that's what we're dealing with. I don't know. Uh, the thing that terrifies people about the skinwalkers isn't necessarily so much that they uh, appear to take on an animal form, but that they're witches. That they're known to be spellcasters for the people who believe in
Yes.
that stuff, and they'll curse you if you make them upset, if you disrespect them, if somehow you offend them, and their curses. And I look, I I'm trained as a scientist. Uh, but I do believe that there are things we don't understand, and I also believe that our minds are very powerful. And I think one of my theories about, if you want to call it magic, is that it requires the belief of both the person doing it and the belief of the person receiving it. So if you're from this culture or this area, like I said, suppose you're just a white or a black person living near the reservation, but you've absorbed this culture and this, belief because everyone talks about it, and you believe that Skinwalker, the witch, has powers. Then when the Skinwalker blows its bone dust on you or whatever it does, it's going to affect you. And, you can call it the placebo effect, psychosomatic, whatever you want to call it. But it'll affect you if you're a believer. And it seems like it's a very easy thing to start to believe in when you live around them. And then, of course, the counter to it is finding a medicine man who can perform a ceremony on you that, frees you of the curse. And that, again, you have to believe in that, and he has to believe in that, and then it works. So, is it possible that somehow they figured out a way to do, like I said, a glamour spell that, affects people? Because even people who don't live near the reservation now, they've heard a few skinwalker stories, usually, even in a cursory sort of way. Maybe that's enough that when you're driving down that lonely highway in northern New Mexico or northern Arizona, and you see what you should see as just a Navajo man, you interpret it as, a coyote or something else weird. I don't know. It's just a theory of mine. But
Ooh, that is so excellent. Great stuff again. Obviously, this is expected from, as previously stated, a brilliant mind and a scientist. My final question for you before we do let you get back to things you need to attend to, even though there is a big difference, and yes, I wish we could speak more to the indigenous medicine men, actually have their opinion on this. Does a skinwalker have the capability, if it really wanted to take on a form of a werewolf, do you think? Meaning, yes, seemingly by nature it's supposed to be he or she that walks on all four, but could there be some sort of correlation? Meaning, could someone that has the power to do that then be able to take on that? Because supposedly you have to have the pelt of the animal, correct?
Yeah. I mean, maybe, like I said, even with what I was just saying, I could be 100% wrong. But if what I'm saying has, a few things right, if they, wanted their image to be more of a freak of nature, a werewolf type of thing, maybe they could do that.
That's creepy.
Or maybe, they could just half do it, and not quite convert everything. I don't know. I do think that the idea of them actually transforming into, like literally changing their flesh, and especially when we're talking about something that's much bigger than what they started off as, that defies all laws of physics and medicine. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible, but, that type of power could be used for all sorts of other incredible things, the revolutionize science, be able to create mass out of what would seem to be nothing, but has to come from somewhere, we're talking like, super future technology type of stuff. And so it would seem to be wasted on just, scaring people. But if we're talking about just making people think that they saw a werewolf, yeah, maybe.
Ooh, again, absolutely legendary stuff. Well, to the audience, we do need to allow our scientist, William White, to get back to things he needs to attend to. He's extremely busy and also needs to catch up on some sleep. No worries, though. He is a bi-weekly host. You can check out our previous content down below if you'd like to get caught up on things we've already covered, or be on the watch out for the new things we will have on the horizon. Yet, until next time, this will be the conclusion of the meeting of the Midnight Society. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight, man. I appreciate you.
Always a good time.
Ooh, my creatures of the night, I do adore every single one of you. And thank you for hanging out tonight. Please like, comment, subscribe, share the truth and the facts to the algorithm. I will catch you very soon.